Pleasurable experiences, foods that we like. Think of the foods at State Fair that we may be drawn to. Even the kind of the crazy things, chocolate covered fried grasshoppers or whatever your particular preference is there. But whatever they might be, I think the underlying trait here is this, these constant little adjustments and tweaks that end up coming up in our life. Um, and I think, it doesn't take too much of a introspection or looking closely there, but if we do find something that we like, I think oftentimes there's something just a little bit better. We may find a comfortable situation, but we'll want just to do a little further adjustment. And underlying all that is, I think, just a general kind of up and down feeling that comes up in life where we're just doing those little tweaks to try to find something that we like. And it's not at all to say that this is bad at all. This is basically the human situation where we're making these little adjustments here and there. And of course, it happens in all different levels. I've mentioned a few sort of mundane aspects, but it can come up in more serious experiences in our life as well. But as I was thinking about this, it was maybe just something interesting came out of that, and in reflecting on all these, this continual negotiation we have with our life, that I think what is actually happening there, kind of at a surface level, it just seems like we're trying to make ourselves comfortable. But I think at a deeper sense, everything that we do in life is actually to find and to understand what true peace is. So all these different attempts that we're making to change our life or make these adjustments and tweaks, it's actually, I think, in a deeper sense, out of trying to understand what the truth of our situation is. So no matter what we might be doing, I think really kind of on the deeper sense, it could actually ironically come out in some pretty unskillful ways too. We may exhibit anger or different things that are pretty misguided. But I think even those things, obviously it's coming out of confusion if we're trying to find happiness by expressing anger, but really it's coming out of a frustration that's, I think, pretty deep, which, like, as I was saying before, can ultimately trace to a deep sense of wanting to understand what's happening in our life. Of course, these misguided ways are not helpful at all, but I think they point to something deeper, perhaps. And I wanted to bring in a few teachings by Katagiri Roshi. Katagiri Roshi, I think a lot of people know who that is. It's our teacher, Norman Steve's teacher, who helped bring Zen to Minnesota back in the 70s. In this particular, actually a couple quotes here come from a book called Returning to Silence. Again, that's Katagiri Roshi. And this passage, I think, speaks a little bit to what I'm bringing up here in the talk. Katagiri says, "Whatever happens, all is going on in this vast expanse of the ultimate nature of existence. If you cast a pebble into the quiet ocean, the ripples extend out in all directions and finally melt into the ocean. This is really human life. So from this vantage point, whatever kind of ripples you can see, suffering, up and down waves, whatever kinds of things come up, remember they are happening in the vastness of the ocean. And sooner or later, they melt back into the immense ocean. This is characteristic of the ultimate nature of existence, in which all sentient beings are present from moment to moment. So Katagiri is talking about the vastness of the ocean. So we may see or experience something unsatisfactory. Katagiri uses the term suffering, the up and down waves of life. But I think he's saying that the true nature of this and this kind of yearning that we can have to understand what this is, this vastness of the ocean he's speaking of, is actually just understanding what our life is in all of its variety. So I think that's really why we practice, is to understand that even if waves are coming up, even if suffering is coming up, the practice is to resume this life that we're living. And I think that really, when we settle down a bit, it doesn't make any intellectual sense. So I think there's trust that can be helpful in carrying out our practice. The trust of just coming back to this experience, because we can see elements of this seeking for pleasure and comfort sort of manifesting in how practice unfolds, where we'll want practice to sort of be that tool that we use to make life make our life into a certain move it into a certain direction or get something out of it here. But as we'll address here in another quote by Katagiri, what this actually, the practice actually is just trusting this moment to return here to fully live out this life. But as I was kind of mentioning, we'll have those tendencies of, even with practice, trying to use it to appease whatever kind of notion that we have about what we want it to do. Reminds me a little bit of an African proverb. I believe that's where the source of it is. The phrase that we try to make grass grow faster by pulling on it. So there's this kind of irony that we get wrapped up in, or this counterintuitive action about wanting something, but in doing so, we're actually kind of hindering what we're ultimately wanting to take place. I think this dynamic can happen in meditation as well, where maybe we're sitting and then a lawnmower starts up outside and we kind of sense that as a disruption, something that we want to go away. Maybe an earlier conversation that we had is bubbling up in our mind as we're sitting, and we'll sort of want that to go away as well. We want our sitting to be calm and serene. But then we'll notice, well, I'm thinking about a prior conversation. So then we'll want our thinking to go away. It's like several different things there that we'll identify, and we'll, kind of envision something that we want that's something a little bit different than what's happening. So we're kind of like pulling the grass. We're trying to pull out those weeds of thought as we're sitting. But I think this practice is much more like living with the weather. When we're just living our life, that's something that's pretty clear. We can't avoid what the weather is. Obviously, we will have a lot of opinions about what's good weather and what's bad weather. But the spirit of non-gaining, non-seeking can be a part of what our sitting is, just being with this weather, being with what's happening. We can simply recommence our life as it is and just be in this weather moment by moment. So the question I think comes up, how does this undulating up and down come to rest? So what Katagiri is talking about, the suffering, the up and down waves. And as he alludes here, I mean, you kind of get a sense of a very gentle approach where that pebble is being cast in the ocean, the waves or the ripples spread out, but then very naturally it comes to rest again. And the practice, I think, is, again, this gentle practice. It's a practice of realizing what is true in our life, what's true to life. And again, we'll be living our life and then having these predilections and preferences come up. But I think the practice is here to help us understand that the little quick fixes that we may find enticing actually do not provide any type of ultimate fix. So it's not so much trying to stop, it's not at all really trying to stop thinking or control in any sense, but actually just to understand what those preferences are, that desire for a quick fix in all the different ways that it comes up. Katagiri says here, also from the same book, he says, "It is characteristic of human beings to have a mind seeking for the truth. Whether we know it or don't know it, it doesn't matter. We have this mind already." And here, yeah, he's actually using the term seeking a little bit differently than I am when he says that human beings have a mind seeking for the truth. I think what he's getting at here is this deep yearning for understanding what is actually going on, not the more mundane seeking that I was talking about. But he says, whether we know it or don't know it, it doesn't matter. We have this mind already. So again, another teaching here that I feel has a quality of a sort of a gentle quality. So this understanding the ripples coming to rest of their own accord is, I think, a way of understanding how he says here, we have this mind already. So I think what he's pointing at is the awareness that is completely what our life is at all moments is always the experience that is happening. So we don't have to seek after that, or we don't have to try to control our situation in order to understand this full life, this full awareness that's always happening. So really the practice is just to resume what is already happening, this awareness. And I think from that vantage point is, we might say, we can understand that many different things will be happening in our life. And those are kind of irrelevant in the sense of just understanding what awareness is, coming back to awareness. And with awareness, I think you can make the argument that we would actually maybe be a bit more equipped to handle the ups and downs in life when we're really engaged, paying attention, and taking care of our life, trying to respond appropriately to situations as they come up. So the practice is just returning to this experience over and over. And as we watch closely, we can see this seeking for comfort and pleasure as it comes up. And notice that the so-called problem is not thinking itself, but rather the practice, I think, is helping us see more clearly that, oh yes, I'm thinking of this as a solution. the little quick fixes that we do. So all the practice I think is helping us do is just to realize that we do these things in kind of with a sense that this is going to actually provide ultimate happiness somehow, all the little things that we're doing. So the practice is just understanding that, yeah, I kind of, when I'm doing these things, my notion is that I think it's actually going to solve the problem. So just seeing that and understanding that that type of perspective, understanding, what that is actually kind of the important part. That the usual way that we try to solve problems is essentially an impossible task to try to control and manipulate our way to happiness using our different techniques and so forth. I came across this idea of doing the impossible reminded me of some Chuck Norris jokes that I came across recently. You ever heard those? So Chuck Norris is this action movie star. Basically, I actually haven't really seen too much of his movies, but I think, like he'll do this martial arts kick and he'll knock over a house or something like that. So he's basically this invincible, he can do the impossible. Some of the jokes are Chuck Norris counted to infinity twice. Or when Chuck Norris slices onions, the onions cry. Let's see. When the boogeyman goes to sleep at night, he checks his closet for Chuck Norris. And Chuck Norris can divide by 0. So, and the list goes on. If you want to check online, there's hundreds of these things. So, but, I think when we look at what humanity is doing, just over the centuries and all the way back, the reason why we haven't woken up is kind of, we think we're Chuck Norris a little bit, I think, in some sense, that we can kind of control our life. And obviously you see it in the political realm too. Like, if I can just change that other person's mind, then everything will be fine. This sense of, we think manipulation or, adjusting things the way we want is gonna lead to happiness. But really, again, the practice is much more simple than that. These different things that we engage in don't actually bring us the peace that we're looking for. So we don't actually need to attempt the impossible, which I think is probably good news in a way, because that sounds a little taxing. The truth is already here, so we can actually just live our life as it's coming up. So the Buddha Dharma, the teaching of the awakened, reminds us that we can actually understand the source of this up and down again. And in some ways, it's not an easy practice, setting up a regular sitting practice, devoting ourselves to different things, whatever it might be, however we might engage with the practice, a regular sitting practice and so forth. So, it's not easy in some ways, but I think it's not unreasonable too, especially if we can gauge ourselves in a way where we can kind of see this happening for the long term. It's sort of like, if it can settle in a way where, just like maybe, other things in life where if we want to get something done really quick, there's some, just kind of like a stress to that basically. But if we can see practice as something that we'll just dedicate ourselves to for our whole life. I think there's a feeling that although there may be difficulties here and there, it is definitely a reasonable thing that we can do. Just stay steady with that, bring a steadiness to practice, and then also have this steadiness come about from practice itself. The life presents itself in astounding variety. As I was mentioning, like the Minnesota weather, just many different things, the various things that we experience in life. I was thinking of just taking a walk and seeing the different variety of clouds. Like today, it's more of a hazy sky, but oftentimes there's very distinct clouds, and the trees are just wafting with the wind. It reminded me a little bit of Paul Courtney. This is a member that a longtime member at Dharma Field, a beloved practitioner who recently passed away. I remember a few times he would talk about walking his dog. And he said an interesting thing, that when he was in the park, oftentimes his eyes were drawn to the sky. And something resonated there for me. It's just kind of like the purity of the clouds. And it's almost like, well, I saw him, I think of him as such an embodiment of practice, somebody who was in it for the long haul. And I don't know, it seems like his eye was drawn to natural things like the sky. And certainly when he would tell his stories about different things, walking his dog or taking hikes, it had that feeling to it. So it was just kind of a recollection of how we too can really sense this fullness of life in all the different ways that show up, whether it's kind of pausing a little bit and looking up at the sky and seeing this tremendous variety that shows up in our life, and this experience that is fully presenting itself in each moment. And I think really that's the practice, is just telling us, helping us stay here with this full spectrum of life. Really, that's as simple as what the practice is. And with this broad eye of equanimity, we can really feel what our life is and respond. And that includes all the wily things that go on in the world. With awareness, we can really pay attention to what's going on. We can pause and really stay with this moment and know that life is actually complete. It's always totally complete. That doesn't mean that there's things that don't need some addressing in the world. Obviously, there are, but really the true quality of life is that it's actually totally complete. Katagiri, in another quote here, says, "So whatever we do," and this is addressing Zazen or sitting meditation, Katagiri says, "So whatever we do, we have to be fair. If we use Zazen as a means to attain enlightenment, at that time, we can't be fair with our dealings with Zazen, sitting meditation, because we are already handling Zazen as something other than Zazen." Katagiri, in this particular example, I think, shows the mind of trying to tweak things or use sitting meditation in order to get something else. So the quote here, I think, is helping to slow down a little bit, just notice if that's happening. And of course, the instruction for meditation is just to come back to the breath. So this is really, for me, quote, it says that we can actually just trust the breath. All these other examples of humanity kind of going after different things kind of shows the trust that we have in ideas and thinking and tweaking things and adjusting things, but slowing down a little bit, staying here, we can actually trust the breath, or just trust practice. And really, the depth of practice is not something that we could ever intellectually understand. So it's also being at ease with understanding that we can't make sense. We can't fully explain what practice is. We actually have to do it. We actually can just trust experience itself. Um, different ideas will come up about it, but with that trust of even not making intellectual sense out of it, we can actually just do the practice in a very simple way. Just follow the breath. There's also other aspects of the teaching that came up when I was thinking about this, not being able to intellectually understand. They'll perhaps hear teachings of emptiness or non-substantiality. So these are teachings that are meant to um, draw our mind back to experience. And they'll explain that we don't actually find any permanence with experience itself. So in the realm of thinking and so forth, we'll have ideas of this and that, inside and outside, all kinds of different notions, basically. So the teachings are helping us understand that all those notions are based, they work because they the underlying assumptions is there are different things. We're thinking about the lawnmower or the conversation that we had. So there's this permanence that we attribute to different things. And then the teachings say that actually true experience doesn't bear out permanence or these abiding things. But then, so also with teachings like that, I think for my practice, it's been almost reading that and understanding that I can actually just trust the breath. The trust is in relation to experience itself. Because obviously, if we sort of try to come up with some sort of alternate theory, so if we hear about emptiness, our mind will think, well, then how is it? And we won't really notice that we're trying to go for another intellectual understanding. So I really like when Katagiri says these phrases. Let's see here. Like, even though we don't understand, I'm not finding it exactly here, but it's kind of interwoven into a lot of his teachings that even though you don't understand, you can still practice. And I think that's an encouragement to come back to what is actually true to life, rather than trying to work through our head what teachings mean, but actually just know that they're always pointing to experience. So when a teaching says we don't find permanence, I mean, there's things that sort of resonate on an intellectual level, like obviously everything is completely changing at just unbelievable speed, so it makes sense. But really, to understand the depth of non-substantiality is to know, actually, there's nothing in the first place to be changing. It's just fully, completely um, flowing reality. And again, this is just a way of saying that what is true, what is understood is experience itself. So just teachings to help us come back to experience. Katagiri says here in this last quote that I have by him, he says, "We are peaceful, we are harmonious from the very beginning. That is why we should not expect to acquire peace. Take off all your conceptual clothes, and what is left? Finally, there is nothing to think about. All we have to do is just plunge in." So maybe that's just looking at the sky when we're taking a walk. Or if we're thinking about a prior conversation, just notice what that is and don't need to scold ourselves for being lost in thought or being distracted by our phone or something like that. But we can just plunge into life, no matter what it is, fully engage. So this trust in the practice is to actually see the beauty of the fact that life never tricks us. Like the true reality of life is fully transparent. It's fully presenting itself just as it is. Obviously, in life, we'll find people trying to trick us. So I think, and life may not always be fair. We can see that in the world in so many different ways. But I think that definitely is the area of the confused human world. So unfairness, or people tricking each other, but actually when we see life, the life of reality, it is completely fair. It is never trying to trick us. Kind of like the weather, it's just fully what it is. It's there's nothing hidden or transparent, or nothing hidden. It's fully transparent, and that's our life is just clearly right here what it is, and practice is no more complex than coming back to what this is, resuming awareness in each moment, and doing our best in life to take care of whatever is coming up. That's everything I have today. I don't know if the talk has prompted any questions or comments at all. I'd welcome them if you have any.
Thank you for weaving in a Chuck Norris joke or a couple of them.
Yeah,
I really appreciate
they're
it.
classic. They
Yeah.
go back a ways.
Yeah, definitely.
No questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.